On the morning of August 23, 2009, surveillance cameras captured Reverend Carol Daniels arriving at her small church in Anadarko, Oklahoma. It was a Sunday like any other. She parked her car at 10 o'clock, walked through the front door, and prepared for a service that likely no one would attend. By noon, she would be dead. Her body would be discovered in a position so deliberate, so ritualistic, that investigators would spend years trying to understand whether they were looking at a crime of opportunity or something far darker. This is the story of 5 unsolved murders across Oklahoma, spanning nearly 4 decades. Each case reveals not just the brutality of the crimes themselves, but the limitations of small-town policing, the corrosive effects of the opioid crisis, and the quiet failures that allow killers to vanish into the fabric of everyday life. Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Carol Faye Daniels was born in Oklahoma City on October 26, 1947, into a world still grappling with segregation and inequality. She attended Douglas High School, one of the historically black schools in the city, and graduated in 1965 during a period of profound social change. She went on to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree in chemistry and biology from Central State University in 1971, a significant achievement for a black woman in the sciences during that era. While at Central State, she joined Zeta Phi Beta, a sorority founded on principles of scholarship, service, and sisterhood. That same year, she married Alvin Daniels, and the couple moved to Spokane, Washington, where they spent several years before returning to Oklahoma in 1978. By 1990, Carol had been ordained by Christ Holy Sanctified Churches, a small denomination rooted in the holiness movement, which emphasized personal sanctification and a strict moral code. She eventually became the pastor of Worthy Temple Christ Holy Sanctified Church in Anadarko, a town of roughly 6,000 people located about 50 miles southwest of Oklahoma City. Anadarko had a complicated history. It was the former county seat of Caddo County and home to significant Native American populations, but by the early 2000s, it was struggling with poverty and drug abuse. Friends and family described Carol as gentle, devoted, and steadfast in her faith. She made the 60-mile drive from Oklahoma City to Anadarko every Sunday, rain or shine, to lead services at her church. Most weeks, no one showed up. Occasionally, residents from a local nursing home would attend, but Carol never wavered. She believed in the mission of the church, even when it seemed no one else did. The building itself was modest, tucked into a neighborhood where small businesses had shuttered and foot traffic was sparse. On the morning of August 23, 2009, Carol followed her usual routine. Surveillance footage confirmed she arrived at the church around 10 in the morning. She unlocked the front door, entered alone, and began preparing for the day's service. By 11:40, a retired bishop and his wife drove past the church and noticed Carol's car parked out front. They knew she often spent Sundays alone there, but something about the stillness of the scene troubled them. The church doors were closed, and there was no sign of activity. The bishop tapped on the door with his cane and called out for Carol. When no one answered, concern turned to alarm. The Anadarko Police Department was located just 1 block away, and officers were notified immediately. Officer Ashley Burris responded within minutes. He approached the church and found a side door slightly ajar. He entered cautiously, moving through the narrow hallways of the building until he reached the sanctuary. What he found was a scene of calculated brutality. Carol Daniels lay dead at the pulpit, her body positioned in the shape of a crucifix. She had been stabbed multiple times. Her clothing had been removed. Her hair had been burned. Investigators later determined that she had defensive wounds on her hands, indicating she had fought back against her attacker. There were no signs of sexual assault, but the staging of her body suggested a symbolic or ritualistic component to the crime. Carol's purse and briefcase were missing. The killer had also taken her clothing and, disturbingly, had sprayed some kind of chemical solution on and around her body. Investigators believed this was an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. The back door of the church, which led to an alleyway, was not covered by the nearby security cameras. Police removed the door itself and submitted it as evidence, hoping to find fingerprints, fibers, or traces of biological material. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, known as OSBI, was brought in to assist the Anadarko Police Department. OSBI is the state's primary law enforcement agency for major crimes, providing forensic analysis, investigative support, and coordination across jurisdictions. Agents spent months gathering evidence and interviewing potential witnesses. The surveillance footage from the nearby convenience store, a place locals referred to as the stop and fetch, was of such poor quality that no identifiable suspect could be seen. Investigators faced a critical problem. Anadarko, like many small Oklahoma towns, was in the grip of a methamphetamine epidemic. Drug-related crime had spiked dramatically in the years leading up to Carol's murder. Witnesses were often reluctant to come forward, fearing retaliation or unwilling to engage with law enforcement. The theory that eventually gained traction among investigators was that the killer had broken into the church intending to steal money or valuables. When Carol confronted the intruder, the situation escalated into violence. But this theory did not account for the staging of the body, the removal of her clothing, or the burning of her hair. Those details suggested premeditation, or at the very least, a psychological dimension that went beyond a botched robbery. For years, the case languished. Then, in 2015, a woman came forward with a startling claim. She told investigators that she had seen a suspect with a blood-stained blouse and a knife around the time of the murder. She directed them to a shed where she believed the items had been burned. Police searched the location but recovered nothing. Days later, the tipster died under circumstances that were never fully explained. The timing of her death fueled speculation, but without corroborating evidence, her account remained an uncorroborated lead. Eventually, investigators focused on a main suspect, a 55-year-old woman named Denise K. Cooper, who went by Darnell. Cooper had a lengthy criminal history. She had served time in prison for the distribution of methamphetamine and had been arrested multiple times for assault. According to some reports, Cooper had confessed to the crime while dying of cancer at a casino, speaking to a friend in what may have been a moment of unburdening. A witness claimed to have seen Cooper on the day of the murder entering a shed with a bloody knife and a black blouse, then burning the items inside. In 2017, at the request of the district attorney, a grand jury was convened to hear the evidence against Cooper. A grand jury does not determine guilt or innocence, but rather whether there is probable cause to issue an indictment. Before the proceedings could be completed, Cooper died of cancer. Her death effectively closed the avenue for prosecution, and the case returned to its unsolved status. Interestingly, in June 2017, another pastor in the region was killed under suspicious circumstances. Michael Dean Woolworth, who led First Missionary Baptist Church about 20 minutes from Carol's church, was burned to death outside his own building. Investigators explored possible connections between the two crimes, but found no definitive link. In 2010, Carol's church was demolished. A memorial now stands at the site, a quiet reminder of a crime that shattered a small community. A $10,000 reward remains in place for information leading to an arrest and conviction. As of October 2025, no one has been charged in the murder of Reverend Carol Daniels. The case remains open, a testament to the challenges of solving violent crimes in communities where trust in law enforcement is fragile and witnesses vanish before they can testify. Edgar Joe Eddington, known to everyone as Eddie, was born on March 9, 1945 in Alameda County, California. By his early 50s, he had settled in a mobile home in North Tulsa County, Oklahoma, where he lived a quiet but purposeful life. Eddie was known for two things. First, he was a man who would drop everything to help a neighbor or a friend. Second, he was a master breeder of champion dogs, animals that competed in national shows across the country and won accolades for their form, temperament, and training. Eddie had developed a reputation in the competitive dog breeding community, and he supplemented his income by creating custom harnesses for show dogs, each one tailored to the specific measurements and needs of the animal. His first marriage to a woman named Wanda ended in the 1970s, but they remained close because they had 3 children together. Eddie later married a woman named Vicky, and the couple lived together in the mobile home on the outskirts of Tulsa County. It was a modest life, but Eddie seemed content. He spent his days working with his dogs, crafting harnesses, and maintaining the small property where he lived. On the afternoon of February 5, 1997, Vicky returned home from an errand. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed that a window had been broken out of the mobile home. Her first thought was likely a burglary, but when she stepped inside, she found something far worse. Eddie was lying near the front door, covered in blood. He had been beaten and stabbed to death. The scene was chaotic. There were signs of a violent struggle, and investigators noted multiple shoe prints throughout the home, suggesting that at least 2 people had been involved in the attack. Eddie's wallet was missing, and one of his younger dogs, a particularly valuable animal, was also unaccounted for. The theory that emerged was that Eddie had interrupted a burglary in progress. When the intruders realized he was home, the situation turned violent. Forensic analysis of the scene provided some clues, but no definitive answers. The shoe prints were measured and photographed, but without a suspect in custody, there was no way to match them to an individual. Investigators believed that Eddie had tried to escape through the broken window, possibly attempting to flee or call for help, but was captured outside the mobile home and forced back inside, where he was killed in a brutal assault. The question that haunted investigators was whether the crime had been planned or opportunistic. If it was a simple robbery, why take the dog? Champion dogs are valuable, but they are also traceable. Taking an animal with pedigree papers and a known lineage would be a significant risk for anyone trying to sell it. This suggested either extreme desperation or a level of naivety on the part of the killers. Tulsa County Sheriff's Office launched an investigation, but leads were scarce. The mobile home was located in a relatively isolated area, and there were no eyewitnesses to the crime itself. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles in the area in the days leading up to the murder, but descriptions were vague and conflicting. Without physical evidence linking a specific individual to the scene, detectives had little to work with. Over the years, the case went cold. Eddie's family continued to push for answers, but the investigative trail had gone dry. The dog was never recovered, and no arrests were ever made. As of October 2025, the murder of Eddie Eddington remains unsolved. The case file remains open, stored in the archives of the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, waiting for a witness to come forward or for new forensic techniques to breathe life into decades-old evidence. Judy Ellen Weichert was born in Ponca City, Oklahoma, on September 15, 1950, to Joseph and Margaret Lechtenberg. She graduated from Ponca City High School in 1969, a time when the country was divided over the Vietnam War and the civil rights movement was reshaping American society. Judy was athletic, disciplined, and passionate about fitness. On her 33rd birthday in 1983, she married Steve Weichert, and together they settled in Oklahoma City, where Judy worked for Exxon Oil. She was known among friends and family as kind, dedicated, and fiercely independent. In her spare time, she ran. Running was not just exercise for Judy, it was a form of meditation, a way to clear her mind and maintain her physical health. One of her regular routes took her along North Sarah Road near the Sundance Airport in northwest Oklahoma City. It was a relatively quiet area, popular with joggers and cyclists, though it was also somewhat isolated, especially in the early morning hours. On the morning of July 28, 1984, Judy left her home for what she expected to be a routine run. She followed her usual path along North Sarah Road. At some point during her run, a man approached her. What happened next would leave her fighting for her life. Around 9 in the morning, a couple driving along North Sarah Road saw a woman lying in the grass near the roadside. They stopped and realized she was severely injured. They flagged down a passing police officer, who immediately called for an ambulance. Judy was conscious but in critical condition. She had been stabbed multiple times. Her injuries were extensive, and she had lost a significant amount of blood. Paramedics rushed her to a nearby hospital, where doctors worked frantically to stabilize her. Despite their efforts, Judy passed away around 1 in the afternoon from blood loss. Before she died, however, she provided investigators with a description of her attacker. According to Judy, the man who attacked her was white, in his late 20s to early 30s, approximately 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet tall, slender but muscular. He had a large nose, long, wavy, dirty blonde hair, a scruffy beard, a strong jaw, and a ruddy complexion. Most distinctively, he had a circular tattoo on his upper left shoulder. She also told investigators that he drove a Volkswagen Beetle. A witness in the area corroborated part of her account, reporting that they had seen an older, faded blue Volkswagen Beetle near the scene around the time of the attack. The Oklahoma City Police Department formed a task force dedicated to solving Judy's murder. In the first year alone, they received hundreds of tips, interviewed over 1,000 people, and tracked down approximately 400 owners of blue Volkswagen Beetles in the Oklahoma City area. Each lead was meticulously followed, but none resulted in an arrest. Detectives also explored possible connections to other attacks on female runners in different parts of the country. There had been similar assaults in Pomona, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, and Fairfax County, Virginia. In each case, a lone woman was attacked while jogging in a relatively isolated area. The similarities were striking, but investigators were unable to establish a definitive link between the cases. Without forensic evidence tying the crimes together, the theory remained speculative. The investigation into Judy's murder gradually lost momentum. Her husband, Steve, eventually rebuilt his life, though he carried the weight of his loss with him. He became a well-known musician in Oklahoma and Texas, performing in clubs and honoring Judy's memory through his music. Steve passed away in 2013 from cancer, never having seen his wife's killer brought to justice. As of October 2025, it is unclear whether any DNA evidence from the attack still exists. If it does, advances in genetic genealogy could potentially identify Judy's attacker decades after the crime. Her family continues to hope that modern forensic techniques will finally provide the answers they have waited for since 1984. Kara Hope Fuller was born on October 7, 1984, in Kansas. Her life was marked by tragedy from the very beginning. When she was 2 years old and her sister Nicole was 3, they were living with their 28-year-old mother, Stephanie Fuller, in Wichita, Kansas. Nicole's father, who was also Kara's stepfather, was a 27-year-old man named Charles Morris. He and Stephanie had separated, but Charles was still allowed visitation with the children. On July 29, 1986, Charles stopped by the house to play with Kara and Nicole. Stephanie remained in the living room watching television while the children played in another room. When Charles prepared to leave, he told Stephanie that Nicole was down for a nap. A couple of hours later, Charles walked into a police station and confessed to a crime that no one yet knew had occurred. He had suffocated his daughter Nicole to death before leaving the house. Meanwhile, Stephanie went to check on the girls just before 6 in the evening. She found Nicole unresponsive with a housecoat covering her face. She immediately called 911 and paramedics rushed Nicole to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead on arrival. Kara, thankfully, was physically unharmed. Charles Morris was arrested and charged with murder. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he had suffered a brief episode of depersonalization when he killed Nicole and had lacked control over his actions. A psychologist testified for the defense, arguing that Charles had experienced a dissociative state. Under Kansas law, a defendant can be found not guilty by reason of insanity only if they did not understand the nature and quality of their act, or if they did not know that what they were doing was wrong. The jury rejected the insanity defense and found Charles guilty of second-degree murder. In 1988, the Kansas Supreme Court affirmed the conviction. But Kara's suffering did not end with her sister's death. 10 years later, when she was 13 years old, she was removed from her mother's home due to sexual abuse at the hands of a different stepfather. After that, Kara spent the next 5 years bouncing between foster homes. When she aged out of the system at 18, she moved from Kansas to Oklahoma City. With no family support and few resources, she began working in the streets to survive. She lived this way for 6 months before she was murdered. On June 8, 2004, a fisherman discovered a body floating in Lake Stanley Draper, a reservoir located on the southeastern edge of Oklahoma City. The body had been in the water for some time, making identification difficult. The victim had been stabbed multiple times and left in shallow water about 20 feet from the shore. It took nearly a month for investigators to confirm the identification. The body was that of Kara Hope Fuller, 19 years old. When news outlets reported on the case, they focused not on the tragedy of her death, but on her substance abuse and her work as a prostitute. Little was known about her life until January 2005, when her mother, Stephanie, gave an interview and provided details about Kara's childhood. Stephanie spoke candidly about her own struggles and her inability to help her daughter. She said, and this is a direct quote from that interview, "I quit taking calls from my daughter because it would hurt me because she wouldn't come home. It didn't matter how many bus tickets I arranged for her, she would never show up, and I just couldn't handle the pain anymore." Stephanie passed away in 2008 at the age of 52, having never seen justice for her daughter. The investigation into Kara's murder did not receive significant attention. Sex workers are often victims of violent crime, but their cases are frequently deprioritized or inadequately investigated, a phenomenon sometimes referred to as the less dead. Kara's case was no exception. As of October 2025, no arrests have been made and the case remains unsolved. Wes William Langley was born on November 14, 1984, in rural Vinita, Oklahoma, to Brian and Susie Langley. He graduated from Miami High School in 2003 and played football at Bacone College, a small liberal arts school with a strong athletic program. In 2009, he married Macy McWaters, and by the time he was 35, they were living near Brangus Road and Limestone Drive in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Wes had worked in the gaming industry for 15 years, managing operations at a local casino. He was passionate about wrestling, powerlifting, hunting, and golf. He was also a devoted fan of the University of Oklahoma's football team, the Sooners, and rarely missed a game. Friends and family described Wes as generous, sociable, and known for his distinctive laugh. On August 21, 2020, someone requested a welfare check at Wes's home. When authorities arrived, they found him dead in the garage. He had suffered severe trauma to his head, and investigators determined that the murder weapon was a kettlebell, a piece of exercise equipment commonly used in weightlifting. People close to Wes said he often used his garage as a personal space. It was where he worked out, prepared his hunting gear, and spent time alone. The fact that he was killed in that space suggested that the attack may have occurred during a moment when he felt safe and unguarded. After Wes's body was discovered, police began investigating his relationships. They learned that there had been ongoing arguments between Wes and a neighbor. That neighbor's house was later searched, though it is unclear whether any evidence was recovered. Detectives also noted that a burglary had been reported just hours before Wes was found. A house on the same street had been broken into, though it remains unclear whether the burglary was connected to Wes's murder. The main suspect in the case was a 34-year-old man named Matthew Sy. According to investigators, Sy had accused Wes of having an affair with his wife. Witnesses reported that Sy had been watching Wes's house for weeks before the murder, behavior that suggested obsession or premeditation. In July 2021, Sy was arrested and charged with Wes's murder. He was held for 6 months before being released due to insufficient evidence. Without physical evidence linking him to the crime scene or a confession, prosecutors were unable to move forward with the case. The investigation stalled. Wes's family continued to push for answers, but without new leads, the case grew cold. As of October 2025, no one has been charged in the murder of Wes William Langley. The case remains open, and investigators continue to follow up on any new information that comes in. 5 cases, 5 victims, decades of unanswered questions. Each of these murders reveals the fragile nature of justice in communities where resources are limited, trust in law enforcement is strained, and witnesses are reluctant to come forward. Reverend Carol Daniels, a woman of faith who served a congregation of none, was killed in a church sanctuary and left in a position that still haunts investigators. Eddie Eddington, a man who raised champion dogs and helped his neighbors, was beaten to death in his own home while trying to escape. Judy Vikert, a runner who loved the open road, was attacked in broad daylight and provided a detailed description of her killer before she died, but her attacker was never found. Kara Fuller, a young woman failed by every system meant to protect her, was stabbed and left in a lake, her death barely noted by the press. Wes Langley, a man known for his generosity and his laugh, was murdered in his garage by someone who may have been watching him for weeks. These cases are not just about the crimes themselves. They are about the systems that failed to solve them. They are about the witnesses who stayed silent, the evidence that degraded over time, and the suspects who slipped through the cracks. They are about the families left behind, waiting for closure that may never come. If you have any information about any of these cases, please reach out to the authorities. Even the smallest detail could be the key that finally brings justice. These stories deserve to be told, and these victims deserve to be remembered not just for how they died, but for how they lived.